The Canadian Security Intelligence Service confirms that China meddled with our elections. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. Now, this news is both shocking and in some ways predictable. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service, as reported by the Globe and Mail, released documents showing that China employed a sophisticated strategy to disrupt Canada's democracy in the 2021 federal election. Now, the Chinese government's goal was to back the re-election of Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government, but they only wanted him to maintain another minority government, and they worked to defeat conservative politicians who they considered to be unfriendly to Beijing. Now, to be clear, that's actually a good strategy from China's perspective. A minority government is the ideal scenario because very little gets done. They love it when our two leading parties are constantly butting heads and fighting. And Trudeau, as we all know, is a very soft politician. I can see why he'd be the preferred candidate, but in a minority government. It's a perfect scenario. And to be clear about another point, I actually think we would have gotten this outcome with or without Chinese interference. It just seemed likely that Canada was going to re-elect Trudeau in a minority position. But that's not the question, though. The question is, did China successfully interfere in our election? And if so, that has to be taken very seriously. Even if their impact was minimal, even flipping a couple of seats, that's something that we cannot stand for. It undermines the very integrity of our democratic institution. Former Chief Electoral Officer Jean-Pierre Kingsley is calling for an independent inquiry into China's strategy to interfere in both the 2019 and 2021 federal election. And I do think this is obviously the way to go. We have our security agency telling us one thing. We have Trudeau and politicians saying another. We obviously need an unbiased public inquiry into the matter, an investigation. Let's find out what really happened here. Let's get the facts, and let's do that in a non-partisan way. If this report comes out, and it turns out that the claims were exaggerated, that's one thing. If it turns out that the claims were factual, and we did in fact have severe meddling in our election, then we can discuss repercussions and how to move forward. But I do think we need more facts right now. Our security agency reported that China employed disinformation campaigns, lying and spreading half-truths about certain candidates, and even using proxies connected to Chinese Canadian organizations in Vancouver and the GTA to sway votes. Documents obtained by the CSIS reveal that Chinese diplomats and their proxies, including some members of the Chinese language media, were instructed by the Chinese government to press stories that the Conservative Party was too critical of China and that if elected, it would follow the lead of former US President Donald Trump, and people from students to other individuals could get banned from Canada and attending certain universities and education programs. So obviously that's untrue. That would not happen in Canada. There's no facts that support this claim. It's pure speculation, but they were using that to plant fear in their constituents to force them to vote in a certain way. It's purely disinformation. And other tactics included undeclared cash donations. So they would have people donate to their preferred candidates, and they would receive a tax return, but they'd be still out a certain amount of money. Reports indicate that China would come in and refund you, reimburse you for that difference. So they were funneling a lot of money to their preferred candidates, and those preferred candidates could launch a better campaign to beat their opposition, typically conservative opposition. Further, we have documents here that reveal business owners would be encouraged to hire international students and assign them to volunteer in election campaigns on a full-time basis. Now, that individual, the former chief electoral official, he comes forward and says that the reason why this is so important is that the legitimacy of government is what is at stake. And that's true. He says we have to trust that the electoral process is not being tampered with by a foreign government. And that's true. That's the most important thing here, actually. He says we need to find out what has transpired. And he favors an independent inquiry because that is what will satisfy Canadians. This is not a minor issue. And he's phrased that perfectly. I'm actually very impressed with his statement here. Now, on the flip side, I'm very disappointed with Justin Trudeau's response. It's actually borderline, I don't know how to even put it. Hear it for yourself. Trudeau came forward and he confirmed that he is ruling out a public inquiry to examine China's interference in Canada's democracy. And further, he's insisting that Beijing-directed influence did not affect the outcome of the election. So, what are we supposed to do? Trust Trudeau's word? How ridiculous. He's saying one thing, our security intelligence agency is saying another. Why wouldn't we want an inquiry? Well, there's only one reason. Because Trudeau fears what will come out of it. There's no other way to read this. It's so obvious, it's painful. If Trudeau really believes that no interference had any outcome on the election, that he is innocent, his party is clean, then why wouldn't you want the inquiry to prove that? It would settle the debate, and it would clear your name. The only reason why you would reject that is because he knows what's going to come out of it. That the interference did play a role, it favored his party, and he worries what that would look like in terms of backlash from the Canadian people. It's ridiculous. It's shameful. And it could be argued it's borderline treason. We have to know what happened here, and for our Prime Minister to be very openly against that, to be getting in the way of a public inquiry and an investigation, it's insane. Completely asinine. The Canadian people should be up in arms about this. There should be outrage everywhere. To the diehard supporters of Trudeau, I have to ask, how can you rationalize his response here? How can you make an argument for the good of not doing an inquiry? Who does that help? It helps Trudeau, and it largely helps China too, because now there's going to be a lot of debate about what really transpired here. There's going to be a lot of conspiracy. There's going to be a lot of guessing. You can either support our security agency and their claims, or you can support Trudeau and his claims. I'm saying forget that. I want the facts. And based on the data that I've seen, I do think it's likely the security agency is correct. But a public inquiry would confirm that. And to rather have things be left in the shadows, completely unacceptable. I've had mixed responses to Trudeau, especially earlier on in his career, but something like this really is a nail in the coffin. I can't support such silliness. And everyone in Canada has to ask themselves, why is Trudeau the preferred candidate of the Chinese government? Why would they risk their international reputation to keep him in power as a minority government leader? Is he really that soft with them? Is he that much of an improvement compared to someone the conservative government could offer? And if so, we have to ask where Trudeau's priorities lie. This really calls into question Trudeau's character, and I am still highly baffled by the fact that he would put himself in between an inquiry, that he would reject one outright. I still want that inquiry to happen whether or not he approves of it. I think we have to take this to court, honestly. This has to happen. And further, this shouldn't be a divisive issue. We're not talking about liberal versus conservative supporters and left and right. We're talking about something that we all share and have care for, which is our democracy. It should be unacceptable for everyone, no matter where you land on the political spectrum, that a foreign government is attempting to meddle in our elections. And when we have a report from our security agency saying that it has happened already, and it's likely to happen again, for us to do nothing about that, to not investigate it, to not develop strategies to counter that, that really is a shame. Truly. And everyone responsible for this should be replaced in the next election. There should be zero tolerance from Canadians for politicians who are this easy to trick or to become sellouts or to undermine the Canadian people's objectives. We need politicians who are upstanding. We need someone in a place of power who would still be willing to go forward with an investigation even if they knew it would harm their party, because these issues are bigger than their party. And Trudeau is obviously not that guy. Now, we don't know all of the candidates who supposedly have ties to the Chinese government party, but we are seeing some leaks here and there. Global News has revealed to us that Liberal MP Han Dong is someone who is under high suspicion. He's been a member since the summer of 2019, and our intelligence sources say that he is one of 11 Toronto area writing candidates believed to be supported by the Chinese government. That's 11 candidates just in the Toronto area. Imagine when you include those also in Vancouver and British Columbia. This is no small matter. Even though it's just a handful of seats, we're talking about enough seats to sway an election in some cases. This cannot be stood for. I'm calling on, first of all, the opposition party, that includes both the NDP and the Conservatives, to band together and force an investigation, even if the Liberals are not going to agree to that. I'm also calling on every Canadian to write to their local politicians to put pressure on them. They have to understand their jobs are going to be on the line if they cannot deliver here. Seriously. Every single politician who's refusing to speak up, refusing to take action, and would rather bury the story, has to lose their job. It's unacceptable. Democracy only functions if the citizens can trust both the democratic process and the government officials who are in power. There has to be trust there. There has to be trust in the integrity of the system. There has to be trust that people's voices are being heard. And there has to be trust that those in power are people of upstanding character, not sellouts and compromised individuals. Now, until we get this report, we cannot be sure. And that doubt is going to be extremely detrimental to our society. I'm not sure if Trudeau realizes that, but he's planting the seeds for further corrosion here. Now, with that, it does bring us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the material, feel free to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.